moment I pressed send on that invitation, I thought I was being clever. No one warns you how fast a joke can eat your whole life. I never thought the punchline would be my own reputation in shreds. I'm Philomena, 34, an office admin with a taste for drama and a knack for self-sabotage. I was the wife everyone envied. Perfect marriage, nice apartment, a baby on the way. But I always wanted more. More attention, more excitement, more proof that I mattered. That's how I started the spiral, one harmless message at a time. Owen used to notice me. Back when we were dating, he'd text me random thoughts throughout the day, bring me coffee without being asked, actually listen when I complained about my sister Agnes or my boss. But pregnancy changed everything. Suddenly, I was just this swollen vessel carrying his future, not a woman worth pursuing anymore. He'd come home from his accounting job, grunt hello, and bury himself in spreadsheets or baby preparation research. I started feeling invisible around month 6. Owen would discuss cribs and college funds like I wasn't even there, just some incubator he'd hired for the job. When I tried to talk about my fears or excitement, he'd nod absently and return to calculating diaper costs. The loneliness crept in slowly, then all at once. That's when I started scrolling through old photos on my phone. Joel's face kept appearing. My ex from 5 years ago, the one who used to make me laugh until my sides ached, who'd surprise me with weekend trips and random flowers. I told myself I was just nostalgic, just bored. When I found his number still saved in my contacts, I told myself looking wasn't the same as touching. The first message was innocent enough. Just a casual, "Hey, how have you been? Saw your promotion on LinkedIn." He responded within hours, warm and flirty, like no time had passed. We started texting regularly. Nothing explicit, just reminiscing about our old adventures, complaining about work, sharing memes. It felt like coming back to life after months of being treated like furniture. Agnes noticed the change first. My sister has always been nosy, but she picked up on my improved mood during one of our weekly coffee dates. She kept asking why I seemed so energetic, so secretive. When I brushed her off, she got that look, the same expression she'd worn as a kid when she was planning to tell Mom about my hidden candy stash. Marta was more direct. My best friend since college, she'd always been able to read me like a magazine. She cornered me at my baby shower, asking point blank if I was talking to someone else. I laughed it off, but she kept watching me with those concerned eyes. She knew I was restless, knew I felt neglected, but she also knew how Owen and I used to be happy. The messages with Joel escalated gradually. He'd send photos from places we used to visit together, ask if I remembered our inside jokes, wonder aloud what might have been different if we'd stayed together. I found myself staying up after Owen fell asleep, typing and deleting responses, crafting the perfect balance of friendly and flirtatious. It was just harmless fun, I told myself. Just two old friends catching up. But then Joel started asking about my marriage, about whether Owen appreciated what he had. He'd send late-night messages saying he'd been thinking about me, about how I deserved better than being ignored. The attention was intoxicating after months of feeling invisible. I started complaining to him about Owen's distance, his obsession with practical matters, his complete lack of romance or spontaneity. The due date approached like a storm on the horizon. Owen became even more focused on logistics. Hospital bags, car seat installation, work leave schedules. He treated my labor like a business meeting he needed to manage efficiently. No excitement, no wonder, just items to check off his endless lists. I felt like screaming just to get a genuine reaction from him. That's when the idea hit me. I was lying in bed at 38 weeks, watching Owen organize baby clothes by size and season, when I thought about how shocked he'd be if Joel just appeared. Not for anything inappropriate, just to shake Owen out of his emotional coma, make him realize he'd been taking me for granted. A harmless prank to remind him I was still a desirable woman, not just his baby-making appliance. I crafted the message carefully, making it sound casual and joking. Told Joel I was about to give birth, and wouldn't it be hilarious if he showed up at the hospital with flowers, just to see everyone's faces. I added laughing emojis and made it clear I was kidding around, just imagining the chaos. Then I hit send before I could change my mind. Joel's response came immediately. He thought it was brilliant, said Owen needed a wake-up call, offered to actually do it if I was serious. My heart raced as I typed back, half joking that he should totally come, that it would serve Owen right for being so distant and boring. We went back and forth, building up this elaborate scenario where Joel would arrive with a huge bouquet, and everyone would think he was the father, until I explained it was just a prank. I never thought he'd actually do it. Labor started 2 days later, fast and intense. Owen drove me to the hospital in his usual methodical way, asking about contraction timing and calling the doctor with updates. Even in the delivery room, he was more focused on following medical instructions than on me. I pushed for 3 hours while he stood there like a supervisor, occasionally offering water or ice chips with the enthusiasm of someone restocking office supplies. When our daughter finally arrived, perfect and screaming, I waited for Owen to transform into the emotional, grateful husband I'd been missing. Instead, he immediately started asking the nurses about procedures and paperwork, treating the birth like a successful project completion. I lay there holding our baby, feeling more alone than ever. That's when Joel walked in. He appeared in the doorway like something from a fever dream, holding an enormous bouquet of red roses and wearing that charming smile I remembered so well. The room went dead silent. Owen's face drained of color, then flushed deep red. The nurses stopped moving. My sister Agnes, who'd arrived minutes earlier, made a choking sound. I started laughing, high and nervous, trying to explain it was just a joke, just a harmless prank to lighten the mood. Nobody else was laughing. Owen stared at Joel like he was seeing a ghost, then slowly turned to look at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Complete disgust mixed with something that looked like hatred. Joel seemed to realize he'd walked into a disaster. He mumbled something about congratulations and left the flowers on a chair, backing toward the door while everyone watched in horrified silence. Agnes was whispering furiously to Marta, who'd gone pale. The nurses exchanged glances and found excuses to leave the room. Owen walked over to where I was holding our daughter, gently took her from my arms, and handed her to a nurse. Then he picked up his jacket and walked out without saying a single word. No anger, no shouting, no dramatic confrontation. Just cold, clinical detachment, like he was leaving a meeting that had run over schedule. I called after him, still trying to explain it was just a joke, that nothing had happened between Joel and me, that I'd just wanted to get his attention. My voice echoed in the empty hallway. Agnes and Marta stayed for a few more minutes, both looking at me like I'd lost my mind, before making excuses about needing to call family members with updates. I spent the next 2 hours alone with my newborn daughter and Joel's wilted roses, trying to process what had just happened. Every time a nurse came in, they looked at me with a mixture of pity and judgment. Word was already spreading through the maternity ward about the woman who'd invited her ex-boyfriend to her delivery. My phone buzzed with a message from Owen. Not a text, a formal email, like something he'd sent to a client. The subject line read, "Next Steps," and the body contained exactly 11 words. Filing for divorce Monday. Find your own transportation home. Don't contact me. I stared at the screen until the words blurred together, finally understanding that my harmless joke had just destroyed everything I'd taken for granted. The baby fussed in my arms, hungry and needing comfort I wasn't sure I knew how to give. Outside my hospital window, life continued normally while mine collapsed in real time. The ride home was a nightmare of logistics and humiliation. Owen had taken our car, so I had to call a taxi while juggling a newborn and hospital discharge papers. The driver kept glancing in his rearview mirror, probably wondering why a woman was leaving the hospital alone with a baby, crying silently in his back seat. Our apartment felt like a crime scene. Owen had been thorough, his clothes gone, his office cleared out, even his coffee mug missing from the kitchen sink. He'd left everything baby-related, but taken anything that proved he'd ever lived there. The only sign of his existence was a stack of legal documents on the dining room table, and a note about his lawyer's contact information. I spent the first week in a haze of feeding schedules and legal panic. Owen's lawyer was already moving fast, requesting emergency custody hearings and temporary support arrangements. Every document painted me as an unfit mother who'd brought strange men around my newborn, who'd prioritized inappropriate relationships over my child's welfare. The story spread through our social circle like wildfire. Agnes couldn't keep her mouth shut. She told our mother, who told her church friends, who told their daughters and neighbors. Each retelling made the situation sound worse. By the time it reached Owen's family, I was apparently having a full affair and had invited my lover to witness the birth of his secret child. Owen's parents, who'd always been polite but distant, became openly hostile. His mother posted cryptic Facebook statuses about prayers for healing broken families and the importance of marriage vows. His father, normally reserved, left a voicemail calling me a disgrace and promising I'd never see their granddaughter again. Marta tried to stay neutral at first, but I could hear the judgment in her voice during our phone calls. She kept asking why I'd thought inviting Joel was a good idea, what I'd hoped to accomplish, whether I understood how it looked to everyone else. When I tried to explain about feeling neglected and wanting Owen's attention, she got quiet in a way that meant she thought I was making excuses. Work became another source of humiliation. Daria from accounting had connections to Owen's office, and she'd heard a version of the story that made me sound completely unhinged. She and Fred from Human Resources would stop talking when I walked by, then resume in whispers that followed me down the hallway. Someone had already created a group chat called Delivery Room Drama that I wasn't included in, but knew existed because of the synchronized glances and poorly suppressed laughter. I tried reaching out to Joel, hoping he could help explain to people that nothing physical had happened between us, that the hospital visit really had been meant as a harmless prank. But he'd gone completely silent, probably realizing he'd been used as a prop in someone else's marriage disaster. His social media showed no signs he'd ever known me, no photos, no messages, no acknowledgement that he'd just helped destroy a family. The legal papers kept coming, each batch more devastating than the last. Owen's lawyer had been busy collecting evidence, screenshots of my text conversations with Joel, timestamps showing when I'd been messaging him instead of focusing on my pregnancy. Social media posts that could be interpreted as dissatisfaction with my marriage. Everything I'd thought was private and harmless was now being presented as proof of my unfitness as a mother. My own lawyer, a tired-looking woman who specialized in messy divorces, warned me that Owen had a strong case. The hospital incident looked terrible on paper, especially combined with evidence of ongoing communication with an ex-boyfriend. She recommended accepting supervised visitation and hoping to work up to shared custody over time, but even that seemed optimistic, given how badly I'd damaged my reputation. The custody evaluation was scheduled for the following month, which meant weeks of scrutiny from social workers and child psychologists. They'd interview everyone in our lives, examine our living situations, and determine what arrangement served our daughter's best interests. I tried to prepare by cleaning the apartment obsessively and researching what evaluators looked for, but every article I read made me more convinced I was doomed. Agnes finally called, but not to offer support. She'd been fielding questions from relatives and family friends, and she was tired of defending me. Our mother was embarrassed to show her face at church. Our cousins were asking uncomfortable questions at family gatherings, and Agnes herself was starting to think maybe Owen had good reasons for leaving. The conversation ended with her suggesting I should have thought about consequences before pulling my delivery room stunt. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications, but none of them were friendly. Old college friends were messaging to ask if the rumors were true. Neighbors were posting in local Facebook groups about the drama on our floor, and complete strangers were finding ways to contact me after hearing secondhand versions of the story. Everyone wanted details, wanted to know what I'd been thinking, wanted to understand how someone could be so selfish and stupid. The baby seemed to sense the chaos surrounding her. She cried more than other newborns I'd known, refusing to settle even when fed and changed. I wondered if she could feel my stress, my guilt, my growing panic about our future. During the long nights when she wouldn't sleep, I'd hold her and apologize for the mess I'd made of her life before it had even really started. 3 weeks after the birth, my mother called for the first time since hearing about the hospital incident. Her voice was shaky and disappointed, the same tone she'd used when I was 16 and she'd caught me sneaking out to meet boys. She asked if the rumors were true about me parading my lover at my daughter's birth, if I'd really been carrying on with another man while married and pregnant. When I tried to explain about feeling lonely and neglected, she cut me off and said loneliness wasn't an excuse for destroying a family. The conversation ended with her saying she needed time to process what kind of daughter she'd raised, and that she'd pray for God to help me find my way back to decency. The dial tone felt like another door slamming shut, another relationship sacrificed to my moment of stupidity in that hospital room. I started having panic attacks during routine activities, grocery shopping, walking to the mailbox, answering my phone. Every person I encountered felt like a potential judge, someone who might have heard the story and formed opinions about my character. The world had become a hostile place where my reputation preceded me, and my explanations fell on deaf ears. The supervised visitation center was a beige nightmare of institutional furniture and watchful social workers. I had to check in like a criminal, submit to bag searches, and interact with my own daughter under the scrutiny of strangers paid to document my every move. The visits lasted 2 hours twice a week, barely enough time for her to get comfortable with me before I had to hand her back to Owen. He'd started bringing his new girlfriend to the exchanges, a pretty, soft-spoken kindergarten teacher named Claire, who seemed to embody everything I wasn't. She was patient with the baby, respectful to the social workers, and polite to me in a way that made my teeth ache. Owen looked happier than I'd seen him in months, like he'd finally found the peaceful family life he'd always wanted. The contrast was devastating. While I struggled through supervised visits in a sterile room, they were building a real home together. Claire's Instagram showed cozy domestic scenes, the three of them reading together, cooking dinner, taking walks in the park. My daughter looked content and secure in ways I'd never managed to achieve during our brief time together. At work, the gossip had evolved into something more systematic. Daria had apparently shared the story widely enough that it reached other departments, other buildings, even other companies in our professional network. I'd become a cautionary tale about the dangers of social media and inappropriate relationships, a punchline in conversations about workplace drama and personal boundaries. My boss started scheduling more frequent check-ins, asking pointed questions about my focus and reliability. Co-workers who'd been friendly before began treating me with professional distance, like I was a liability they needed to avoid. The office holiday party invitation list somehow forgot to include me, and nobody seemed to notice the oversight. Fred from HR eventually called me in for a formal conversation about maintaining appropriate boundaries and representing the company professionally. He didn't mention the hospital incident directly, but his references to recent personal challenges and concerning judgment calls made it clear that my reputation had become a workplace issue. I left his office knowing my job was hanging by a thread. The custody evaluation report arrived on a Tuesday that felt like the end of the world. 12 pages of clinical observations and professional recommendations that painted me as an unstable narcissist who'd prioritized attention-seeking over my child's welfare. The evaluator noted my concerning pattern of boundary violations, my apparent lack of insight into appropriate behavior, and my tendency to minimize the impact of my choices on others. Owen was described as a stable, committed father who'd demonstrated appropriate protective instincts by removing himself and the child from my chaotic and potentially harmful environment. Claire was praised as a positive maternal figure who'd quickly bonded with the child and provided consistent, nurturing care. The recommendation was supervised visitation indefinitely, with the possibility of brief, unsupervised visits only after I completed parenting classes, individual therapy, and demonstrated sustained behavioral changes. Even then, overnight visits were considered inadvisable given my impulsive decision-making and apparent inability to prioritize the child's needs over my own emotional desires. I read the report 3 times, each pass making me feel smaller and more hopeless. Every mistake I'd ever made was catalogued and analyzed, every moment of selfishness or poor judgment presented as evidence of my fundamental unfitness as a mother. The woman described in those pages sounded like a monster, someone I wouldn't trust with a goldfish, let alone a baby. Marta stopped returning my calls altogether after the evaluation results became public record. Our mutual friends began excluding me from group chats and social gatherings, probably tired of the drama and uncomfortable with taking sides. I'd become radioactive, someone whose presence reminded everyone of how quickly a life could implode through sheer stupidity. The viral TikTok appeared 6 months after the birth, posted by someone who claimed to know a nurse from the maternity ward. The video didn't mention my name, but it told the story of a woman who'd invited her ex-boyfriend to her delivery room as a prank on her husband, complete with dramatic reenactments and commentary about the audacity of modern women. The video got 2 million views in 3 days. The comments were brutal, thousands of strangers weighing in on my character, my intelligence, my fitness as a mother. Screenshots circulated on Twitter and Facebook, each share adding another layer of humiliation to my already destroyed reputation. I'd become internet famous for all the wrong reasons, a cautionary tale about the dangers of seeking attention. Friends from high school started messaging me, having seen the video and recognized details that matched my situation. Former co-workers reached out with a mixture of concern and morbid curiosity. Even people I hadn't spoken to in years felt entitled to opinions about my choices and their consequences. The worst part was watching Owen and Claire's social media during this period. They'd gotten engaged, and their announcement photos showed a perfect little family, him in a crisp button-down, her in a flowing dress, my daughter in a white romper that made her look like an angel. The caption thanked friends and family for their support during this transition and looked forward to building our future together. The engagement party photos were even more painful. All our former mutual friends were there, celebrating Owen's new beginning, while I sat alone in my apartment, blocked from seeing most of the content, but catching glimpses through people who'd forgotten to adjust their privacy settings. My daughter was the flower girl, toddling around in a tiny dress while everyone cooed over how happy she looked with her new family. I'd been erased so completely that it was like I'd never existed. Owen had found a better version of everything I'd failed to be, a partner who supported instead of undermining him, a mother who put the child's needs first, a woman who brought peace instead of chaos to his life. The contrast was devastating and impossible to ignore. My job finally ended with a quiet termination disguised as a layoff. The company was restructuring, and my position was being eliminated. But everyone knew the real reason. I'd become too much of a distraction, too associated with scandal and poor judgment to represent them professionally. The severance package was generous enough to suggest they wanted me gone quickly and quietly. Agnes sent me a final text message that felt like a formal disownment. She was tired of explaining my behavior to relatives, tired of defending choices she couldn't understand, tired of being associated with someone who'd become a family embarrassment. Our mother agreed that distance was best for everyone, at least until I got the help I clearly needed. The apartment felt like a tomb. I'd stopped decorating after Owen left, stopped maintaining anything beyond basic cleanliness. The nursery remained exactly as he'd set it up, but my daughter had outgrown everything in it during the months she'd been living with her new family. I was preserving a shrine to a life that had lasted less than a day. My final supervised visit was scheduled for a Friday in November, almost a year after everything had started falling apart. My daughter was walking now, babbling in ways that sounded almost like words, developing a personality that I was only allowed to observe from a distance twice a week. She didn't recognize me anymore. When I tried to pick her up, she cried and reached for the social worker, treating me like a stranger who made her uncomfortable. The woman she called Mama wasn't me. It was Claire, who'd been there for bedtime stories and morning feedings, for first steps and first words, for all the moments that build the bond between mother and child. I sat in that beige room, watching my daughter play with toys I hadn't chosen, wearing clothes I hadn't picked out, speaking words I hadn't taught her, and finally understood that I'd lost more than a marriage. I'd lost my chance to be her mother in any meaningful sense, traded it away for a moment of attention that had backfired spectacularly. The social worker made notes about our limited interaction and my daughter's clear preference for her primary caregivers. The language was clinical, but the meaning was obvious. I was becoming irrelevant in my own child's life, a stranger who showed up twice a week to play awkwardly under supervision. Owen's lawyer filed the final petition on a Monday morning in December. The paperwork was clean and thorough, requesting complete termination of my parental rights based on abandonment, emotional instability, and the child's best interests. Supporting documents included the custody evaluation, supervised visitation reports, and evidence of my continued inability to maintain stable employment or housing. The petition noted that my daughter had been living with Owen and Claire for over a year, that she called Claire Mama and showed signs of distress during visits with me, that her development and well-being had flourished in their care while declining during our supervised interactions. Every professional who'd observed our relationship recommended severing the legal connection entirely. I received the papers on the same day Owen and Claire posted their wedding photos online. They'd had a small ceremony with close family and friends, my daughter serving as flower girl in a dress that matched Claire's bouquet. The photos showed a celebration of new beginnings, a family finally free to move forward without the chaos and drama I'd brought to their lives. The final image was a close-up of the three of them, Owen looking peaceful and content, Claire glowing with happiness, my daughter secure in her arms with a smile I'd never been able to create. The caption read, "Forever Family," with a heart emoji, and the comments were full of congratulations and relief that they'd found their happy ending. I stared at that photo until my phone battery died, memorizing every detail of the life I'd destroyed through my own selfishness and stupidity. My daughter looked genuinely happy, healthier and more secure than she'd ever been during our brief time together. They were better off without me, and everyone could see it. The hearing was scheduled for January 15th, exactly 13 months after I'd sent that message to Joel, inviting him to the hospital. I had 30 days to respond to the petition, but my lawyer had already warned me that fighting it would only create more trauma for everyone involved. The evidence was overwhelming, the outcome inevitable. I spent Christmas alone in my apartment, looking at photos of the family celebration I wasn't invited to join. My daughter's first Christmas was documented in dozens of pictures, opening presents, wearing a red velvet dress, sitting on Santa's lap with Owen and Claire. She looked like she belonged there, like she'd always been part of their family instead of mine. The final legal notice arrived on New Year's Eve, a symbolic end to the worst year of my life. Owen was requesting expedited processing of the termination petition, supported by documentation of my missed visitations, my continued employment instability, and my apparent lack of meaningful connection with the child. Even my own lawyer recommended accepting the inevitable rather than dragging out a process that was causing everyone pain. I signed the papers on a grey January morning, officially ending my legal relationship with the daughter I'd carried for 9 months and loved for 13. My signature felt like signing my own death certificate, acknowledging that I'd destroyed the most important thing in my life through a single moment of breathtaking stupidity. The last thing I saw before closing my laptop was Owen's latest social media post, a family photo from my daughter's second birthday party. She was wearing a pink dress and a paper crown, surrounded by balloons and presents, laughing at something Claire had whispered in her ear. The caption thanked everyone who'd helped them build their forever family and looked forward to many more celebrations together. I wasn't in the photo, wasn't mentioned in the caption, wasn't part of the celebration or the future it represented, I'd become exactly what I'd feared most during those lonely nights of pregnancy: invisible, irrelevant, completely erased from the life I'd once thought was mine. The joke that was supposed to get Owen's attention had gotten it, all right, along with everything else I'd ever cared about. My phone buzzed with a final notification, a friend request from someone who'd probably heard my story and wanted to see the train wreck up close. I declined it and turned off the device, sitting in my empty apartment with nothing left to lose and no one left to blame but myself. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.